President yesterday issued a press statement announcing the removal from office of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Charlotte Osei, or if you want, the former Electoral Commissioner, Mrs. Charlotte Osei, and her two deputies, Mr. Amadou Sule and Mrs. Georgina Opoku Amankwa, upon the recommendations of a committee that was set up by the Chief Justice on the basis of Article 146 of the Constitution. The committee recommended their removal from office on grounds of stated misbehavior and incompetence. Article 146(9) obliges the President to act upon the recommendations of the committee, which he did. It is also important to state that the petitions against these persons were sent to the President in the case of the two deputy commissioners by one Emmanuel Kosi Senyo and others, and in the case of the Commissioner Forsen Ampofo and others. These were the people who triggered the petition process that then triggered the constitutional processes that allowed us to be where we are. Now, before the government issued the release, the President met each of them separately, in other words, the Commissioner and her deputies, to inform them of the recommendations and also give them copies of the report, of the committee's report, which I have also in my hand. On the 25th of July 2017, the President received a petition against Mrs. Charlotte Osei, and per the dictates of the Constitution, forwarded the petition to the Chief Justice the very next day. Subsequently, two other petitions against the two deputies, namely Amadou Sule and Georgina Opoku Amankwa, were also received, and same were forwarded to the Chief Justice. Once the petitions were sent to the President, in accordance with Article 146 of the Constitution, the President's only duty, and I emphasize, only duty, was to refer the petition to the Chief Justice, who, according to the Constitution, shall determine whether there is a prima facie case. In other words, the President had no choice but to forward the petition to the Chief Justice. There were 6 allegations against the chairperson, 4 against Amadou Sule, and 4 against Georgina Opoku Amankwa. After the Chief Justice established a prima facie case in all 3 instances, namely 6 allegations against the chairperson, 4 against each of the 2 deputies, she established a committee under Article 146(4) to look into the allegations where prima facie cases had been established. The same Constitution provides that under Article 146(5) that the committee appointed under Clause 4 of the article shall investigate the complaint and shall make its recommendations to the Chief Justice, who shall forward it to the President. The committee, in accordance with the Constitution, was set up, investigated the allegations, called witnesses, and the respondents were represented by legal counsel. Once the recommendation has been forwarded to the President, Article 146(9) offers the President no discretion but to act on the recommendation. For emphasis, it reads, and I quote, "The President shall in each case act in accordance with the recommendations of the committee," unquote. This, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what has happened. 7 months it submitted, after 7 months it submitted its report. This is not the first time Article 146 has been applied. Indeed, in 2015, 2 petitions were filed for the removal of the then chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. The committee investigated complaints of serious misconduct, inappropriate exercise of office, serious misjudgment, and breaches of the law against Mrs. Loretta Lamte, and recommended her removal to the then President John Dramani Mahama. Like now, President John Mahama at that time had no option but to act first on the petition and lastly on the recommendations of the committee. Indeed, in the case of President John Mahama, he also exercised his rights under the Constitution in suspending Mrs. Loretta Lamte even before the committee presented its report, which he had no option but to act upon. The committee found that is the 2015 committee, found that, quote, evidence before the committee proves that, this is 2018 committee on Mrs. Charlotte Osei and her two deputies. The committee states that it found, quote, that there was evidence that the Electoral Commission did not observe any prudent administrative and financial management of the 2015 political parties' primaries. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to go or take you through blow by blow the complaints that were filed against these commissioners one by one and what the committee found in each of their cases. So I'll start with Amadou Sule. This is Amadou Sule. The allegation was that political party primaries were treated as a private commercial project by the deputy chairperson, with funds paid directly into the personal accounts of key staff for the functions to be performed for party primaries. In other words, that political parties paid money to the Electoral Commission for the conduct of their political party primaries, and that these monies, instead of being lodged in EC accounts, this Chief of Staff Committee, Chief Justice Committee, found that these monies were lodged in the personal accounts of individual members of the commission. After witness statements from the chairperson herself against Amadou Sule, the EC Director of Finance, Joseph Kwekua Samoa, the Director of Elections of the NDC party, Samuel Ofosu Ampofu, among others, and the respondent, Amadou Sule himself, the committee established that, quote, the NDC paid over 5 million cedis in cash for their primaries to the EC, and the MPP paid 233,270,000 and also 276,600 cedis for its presidential and parliamentary primaries, respectively. And that as the Deputy Commissioner in charge of operations, Alhaji Sule, quote, has the oversight responsibility for the Electoral Services Department and directly supervises the operations of the said department, unquote. But that Alhaji Sule, quote, defied all the known prudential financial administration practices and took over 5 million cedis in cash and kept same in the custody of individuals, unquote. The committee found that, quote, he allowed over 6 million cedis received on behalf of the commission to be handled in a manner that decries any reasonable prudent accounting principles, leaving room for fraud and misapplication of the money, unquote. Though in the midst of investigations of how the money was managed, the commission opened an account for internally generated funds in December 2015, the deputy head of the Electoral Services claimed it was deposited with the chief accountant for, quote, safekeeping. The Electoral Services Department indeed treated the political party's primary as a private project. The millions of cedis received for the purpose on behalf of the commission were handled in a manner that threw all known financial mismanagement principles, all sound financial management principles in any institution to the wind. And that, quote, there was gross financial mismanagement which opened the commission to fraud and misappropriation of money, unquote. Also, quote, election materials belonging to the commission could not be accounted for, since no proper records were kept as to how these items were procured from the commission's stores, unquote. The committee held that Alhaji Sule demonstrated that, quote, he lacks the skill and ability to perform his duties as the head and supervisor of the commission's operations, unquote. The committee held that at least an amount of 320,822 cedis remained unaccounted for the consumables used for the primaries of political parties in 2015, and that up to date, the remaining 360,000 has still not been paid into the EC's account created in 2015 for that purpose, which they allege is still with the chief accountant for safekeeping. The other allegation that the committee investigated was that the deputy chairperson in charge of operations had persistently instructed officials to carry out illegal vote transfers on the voter management system in clear breach of the law and operational policies of the commission. Documentary evidence produced by the representatives of STL, the contractor in charge of the EC Electoral Register database, showed this. Chairperson Charlotte Osei, who gave evidence against Amadou Sule at this Chief Justice Committee, said that when she heard that the STL was effecting illegal transfers, she asked them to stop. She says that she received this evidence through email from STL of voter transfers done through the VMLs by STL between January 1st, 2014 and 3rd and 4th September 2015. So from January 21st, 2014 to September 2015, Amadou Sule was carrying out illegal vote transfers on the system at the blind side of everybody else in the commission. When she confronted STL why they were doing so against the laid down procedures, the contractor said that all the transfers were authorized, quote, authorized, and showed, quote, scanned copies of WhatsApp instructions from Amadou Sule to STL. There were 17 such exhibits before the committee, with a list of people to be transferred, either through WhatsApp or handwritten notes bearing Alhaji Sule's signature. Though he denied them, the committee found that he wrote and signed them and that the WhatsApp messages were indeed from his cell phone. The committee found him culpable of misbehavior, as his conduct was held to amount to, quote, abuse of office. It therefore recommended that the respondent, Amadou Sule, be removed from office as a deputy commissioner of the Electoral Commission for incompetency and misbehavior, unquote. He was also asked to refund the amount of 320,822 cedis, which was found to be lost to the EC under his watch. The committee also recommended that the chief accountant, Kweku Owusu Ejelabi, be made to pay to the commission the amount of 360,000, which he claimed was still in his custody for safekeeping, failing which he should be charged with the offense of stealing, unquote. That is for Amadou Sule. Now, Georgina Opoku Amankwa. The same petitioner who filed against Amadou Sule filed against the EC deputy chairperson in charge of corporate affairs. The committee focused on 4 allegations. She signed 2 contracts with Superlock Technologies on 6 May 2015 for $24,397,000 and $16,509,500 respectively, without adhering to the provisions of the Procurement Act. Under her watch, EC Staff Endowment Fund contributions for 8 months between 2013 and 2014 were not paid into the Staff Provident Fund, at a time when she was deputy chairperson in charge of finance and administration and had direct supervision over the fund. On the STL contracts, the committee held that Mrs. Opoku-Amankwah, quote, demonstrated gross incompetence and misconduct in executing the two contracts. One, by her failure to seek prior authorization from the Public Procurement Authority. In other words, these contracts that she signed, over $24 million in one instance and over $16 million in another instance, were done absolutely on her own without recourse to the Public Procurement Authority. Number two, by concealing the fact that she had already signed the contracts when she instructed the Director of Finance to write to the PPA for authorization. In other words, after she had signed the contracts, she then wrote to PPA seeking authorization for a contract she has already executed. Number three, having discovered the illegal act, she did not withdraw the contract and persisted with it, damning the consequences that it would have on the EC. Not even when the Electoral Commissioner, in this case Charlotte Osei, started probing it. The committee further held that her action violated the Public Procurement Act, Section 40, and constituted a criminal offense under Section 92 of the same act. On the allegation of the missing contributions to the endowment fund, it was found that the contributions were wrongly applied of the EC and that the EC now has to refund the money. In other words, the committee is recommending that in addition, the money be refunded. Ms. Charlotte Osei gave evidence against Mrs. Opoku-Amankwah, referring to heightened staff agitation over their missing funds. The chairperson also gave evidence that she had undertaken an internal audit and also invited Iyoko to look into the matters of the commission. She failed to disclose the misapplication of the contributions when she was confronted by the then EC chairperson, Dr. Afarijan, and took no concrete steps to replace the funds, even years after they were misapplied. It was held that her actions and inactions had caused financial loss to the staff and probably to the EC as well. On the two allegations, the committee held that she had misconducted herself and showed gross incompetence within the meaning of Article 146 of the Constitution and recommended her removal from office as deputy chairperson of the EC. Now Charlotte Osei. The committee looked into 6 allegations against the chairperson. The first was that without recourse to the commission, she engaged the services of lawyers, that is, sorry at law, without going through the procurement process as the law demands, and that there is no formal contractual arrangement between the commission and the law firm, and the basis for computing legal fees are known, involving fees of 400,000 Ghana cedis. The committee found that there was no documentary evidence of engagement of the appointment of sorry at law, which was in breach of the Public Procurement Act. The committee said that she appointed the lawyers through sole sourcing without the approval of the Public Procurement Authority, and that she misbehaved with the appointment of Messias sorry at law. It held further that, quote, the events surrounding the engagement of Messias sorry at law as lawyers for the Electoral Commission shows incompetence, ineptitude, and dereliction of duty on the part of Mrs. Charlotte Osei, and so we find, unquote. The second allegation was that the chairperson of the EC unilaterally abrogated a duly procured contract with the entity STL and awarded the same contract to the same entity without recourse to the commission and without due process of the Public Procurement Act. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you get this point. The committee says that it found that Mrs. Charlotte Osei cancelled contracts awarded by Mrs. Opoku Amankwa to STL. She cancelled these contracts and then turned round and awarded the same contracts. In other words, this time she then signed now with STL. The same contracts that you signed and the same terms and everything, you cancelled it. Then turned round and re-awarded the same contracts to the same company without recourse to the law. The committee found that upon her appointment in June 2015, Mrs. Osei detected some irregularities with the STL contract, which was yet to be performed and was right to have abrogated it. However, the committee found that her decision to unilaterally award fresh contracts to the same STL in the aggregate sum of $22,340,814 was illegal. That she failed to comply with the internal procurement procedures of the Electoral Commission created by the Commission itself, namely the Entity Tender Review Panel and the Public Procurement Act. All in all, she awarded 12 contracts to STL for the supply of ICT equipment and services. And the committee found that out of these 12 contracts, only one did not exceed her procurement threshold as chairperson, which was 50,000 cedis for goods and services before July 2016. In other words, as a chairperson, there's a limit, there's an amount of money beyond which you cannot unilaterally award a contract. I hope I'm clear. In other words, beyond that amount, you must recourse to the Public Procurement Authority. And in all these contracts, they exceeded the threshold of the amount that was within her power to authorize. But she went ahead to authorize nonetheless. That's the point that we are making. Except one out of the 12. All the letters awarding the 12 contracts to STL were signed by the chairperson herself between 8 February 2016 and 25 November 2016. The committee held, quote, that it was very absurd coming from the chairperson, the very person who led the crusade to abrogate the initial STL contracts, citing breaches of the Public Procurement Act, unquote. The Entity Tender Review Panel consists of the chairperson and her 2 deputies. The committee found that the STL contracts awarded by the chairperson was unlawful, violated sections 16 and 40 of the Public Procurement Act, Act 914. The committee found that she misbehaved, and misbehavior is a quotation, that, quote, she misbehaved in awarding the new STL contracts. It further held that she, quote, showed sheer incompetence in the manner she handled or conducted the award of new STL contracts in view of her experience with the initial STL contracts which were abrogated at her instance, unquote. The third allegation is over the decision to acquire a new office block for the commission. The committee found that the chairperson breached the law on procurement in awarding contracts for works and consultancy service for the new building. The Public Procurement Authority in February 2016 granted approval for the EC to award the contract for consultancy service for partitioning the new offices at the current sum of 98,000 Ghana cedis, 98,100 Ghana cedis, as requested by the EC. Note that the Public Procurement Authority approved a contract sum of 98,100 Ghana cedis to the Commission for the partitioning of new offices. However, in April 2016, in April 2016, the chairperson wrote to the PPA for another restricted tender for internal partitioning of the new office block at a total cost of 3,410,268 Ghana cedis. This was also granted. The committee found that the 2 contracts for the partitioning of the new office block and the contract for consultant services were not put before the Entity Tender Committee as created by the Public Procurement Act and the EC's old internal procedures. The committee further held that the contracts awarded far exceeded the threshold legally allowable to her per the procurement laws. The contracts awarded were 3,976,244 cedis instead of the approved 3,410,263 and 209,444 Ghana cedis instead of the approved 98,100. I'll take this again. In other words, the Public Procurement Authority had approved for the EC to award two contracts, one worth 3,410,263 Ghana cedis. Now, instead of the 3,410,263, which was approved by the PPA, she awarded the contract to the tune of 3,976,244. In the second instance, the PPA approved 98,100, but she ended up awarding 209,443 Ghana cedis. The committee therefore held both to be unlawful. The evidence of witnesses given against the chairperson were by her own staff. In other words, the staff of the Electoral Commission all appeared before the committee right in front of her and made these allegations against her, which the committee held she couldn't defend. The evidence of the witnesses given against the chairperson were by her own staff, namely the head of the procurement unit of the commission and the principal electoral officer. Now, the fourth allegation is about the award of contract for the construction of prefabricated district offices for the Electoral Commission and contract for consultancy for the prefabricated works against the procurement rules. From the evidence, the committee held that the construction of the offices was divided into 4 lots, and the chairperson personally awarded all 4 at the higher rate of $14,337,962. This was in excess of $6,837,962, and that she awarded the contracts without reference to the Entity Tender Committee as required. To stress, the committee found that the value of the prefabricated office buildings was stated as $7.5 million in the letter to the PPA, but the contract was awarded by the chairperson to the tune of $14.3 million. I don't know whether this is clear. It says that she wrote to the PPA for approval for a contract sum of $7.5 million, but then came back and awarded the contract for 14.3 instead of the approved $7.5 million. The fifth allegation was about the use of donor support of $76,000 by a USAID grant for the EC's ICT environment. The contract for the design of the EC's website was also held to be illegal, since she awarded the contract without recourse to the rules of procurement. The last allegation was also about the use of donor funds for an award to repackage the strategic plan of the commission, funded by the UNDP, and to develop a new logo for the commission. That was also in breach of the procurement law. All 6 allegations leveled against Mrs. Charlotte Osei related to breaches of the Public Procurement Act, Act 663, as amended by Act 914. The committee quotes the Chief Justice as having observed in her prima facie determination that, quote, the Public Procurement Act is an enactment which one may say is made in pursuance of the principles of probity and accountability expressed in Article 37(1) of the Constitution. It envisages that in the procurement of goods and services with public resources, there must be standard practices which are aimed at fairness, and value for money so as to strengthen the national economy. It is for this reason, in my view, that the Act is so detailed and specific in the process and procedures it prescribes, unquote. In the words of the committee, quote, in all the procurement activities which we had to investigate, the findings have been that Mrs. Charlotte Osei failed to comply with the Public Procurement Act, unquote. The committee dismissed the defense by the chairperson that procurement was not part of her core functions. The committee observed that she herself was writing directly to seek approval from the PPA to do restricted tender. That she herself as chairperson wrote directly to companies to notify them of contract awards. It held, quote, if procurement of goods and services was not part of the core business of the Electoral Commission, as argued by Mrs. Charlotte Osei, why did she take over the above roles directly when there was a procurement unit with a head in the Electoral Commission, unquote. The committee concluded that enough evidence had been established and therefore recommended her removal from office as chairperson of the EC based on misbehavior and incompetence. It further recommended that the EC should cease using the services of Messiah Sorry at Law as solicitors, but that the firm be paid for the legal services it has rendered so far. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we need to conclude by reiterating what is obvious, or indeed what has become obvious to you this morning, that this removal of the chairperson of the EC and her two deputies has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with government, has nothing to do with the MPP, or indeed has nothing to do with any other political party in our country. It has everything to do with the laws of our country, with our constitution, with holding office holders to account, and with the principles of probity and accountability. It is purely an internally generated matter. The matters that became the subject of the petition against the former Electoral Commissioner and her colleagues were the same set of allegations which they themselves threw against one another in the media and in the public space. And I'm sure most of you covered them, repeating basically what I am re-echoing to you from the committee. Including Mrs. Osei's allegation that Mr. Amadou Sule misused $6 million cedis from the political parties, and the counter allegation against her that she abused procurement processes in several contracts. These were matters that they themselves had put against each other in the media and then proceeded to the committee to level same allegations against one another, which the committee found to be correct. What we have seen appears to be high simmering tensions within the Electoral Commission, which resulted in an implosion after the 2016 elections. These are the facts of the matter, and these are the very facts that the Constitution of the Republic were applied against. Remember that the President took an oath to abide by the dictates of the Constitution of Ghana, failing which he pledged to subject himself to penalties arising therefrom. He has done nothing more or less than to uphold the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. It will be tragic for the country, in the face of these facts and circumstances, for anyone to attempt to turn this matter into a party political affair, as indeed some people are seeking to do. Let me add that every person, including the President of the Republic of Ghana, is subject to the laws of our republic. That is very important to stress. And that we cannot have a country where we have one set of rules for ordinary citizens and another set of rules for people who occupy administrative or, if you want, political office. So for people to suggest that the EC commissioner and her 2 deputies are immune from Ghana's laws and that they are free to dissipate public funds as and how they want, in my view, begs the question. Indeed, there are many Ghanaians who disagree with that position, that everybody who dissipates public funds should be held to account, except the people who called you to a press conference last night and disagreed. It will be tragic for the country, in the face of these facts and circumstances, for us to play politics with this matter. Those who do so do not seek the welfare of our country. It is our hope that Ghana, after these trying events, will end up with an electoral body that will uphold the dignity and integrity that is demanded of the office and its servants.